Hello, Ali. How are you today?
Very well, Dean. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
we're gonna have a good heavy duty conversation for our listeners today, and I'd like to begin by asking. You bill yourself as a hypnotist, and when you use quantum is a broadly used phrase in our days and times. When you speak of the quantum, what are you identifying?
hmm So when I use the word quantum in QHHT, it's also something that was developed by Dolores and a number of us students together. We're not claiming that we're doing quantum physics in the hypnosis room. To
Hmm.
me, quantum points to the possibility that consciousness and our experience of ourselves may be much larger than the ordinary linear identity we walk around with every day. So, in a session, someone may experience another lifetime, symbolic imagery, their higher self, or information that seems to come from beyond their normal conscious awareness. So, I stay curious about what that is rather than pretending I can scientifically prove its source. So for me personally, quantum represents possibility. It reminds me not to reduce a human being to only the story their conscious mind currently knows. There may be layers of memory, intuition, symbolism, consciousness, and interconnectedness that we don't fully understand yet. So that's what I would say in response to quantum, because it's a very, very overused word these days, and
And
it's a very loaded word. But when we look at all of the different sessions that I've had and all the other practitioners have had from the teachings of Dolores Cannon, our teacher, the word that came to mind that best represents the results and what comes up was the word quantum.
Dolores's work was primarily focused on locating and using hypnosis as a tool for primarily what I'm familiar with. She calls them volunteers. I think, if I recall correctly, my teaching, my perspective is that they are actually called wanderers, um, which essentially are higher consciousness beings that have projected an analog projection of themselves at the range of consciousness that we all share. Is your work following that pattern, or are you more general in your expectations?
Well, if you mean Dolores Cannon's three waves of volunteers, which she writes about extensively in her books, versus the wanderers in the Law of One or the raw material, they're similar ideas, but they come from different systems and aren't identical, I would say. So, for example, when it comes to Dolores Cannon's teachings, she describes through her hypnosis and QHHT work souls incarnating on Earth to assist humanity and Earth during the transition that we're going through into the new Earth. Often it's portrayed as having difficulties adjusting to Earth's negativity. People may not consciously remember why they came, but their presence and the energy itself may contribute to the change. So Dolores would divides them into three waves or three generations. But as you well know, that in the Law of One, when they talk about wanderers, it's described through the raw contact material. So these beings are from higher densities who incarnate into third density Earth to be of service. Often, they'll experience alienation, homesickness, or a sense that they don't belong. So a lot of this overlaps with what Dolores teaches, and also what we find from our own sessions. And in the raw material, you're familiar with the whale of forgetting. So it generally prevents conscious memory of their origins. So their primary purpose is service and helping raise planetary consciousness. So this is very much um, related to what Dolores talks about when she talks about the three volunteers. So Ra doesn't use Dolores's three-wave uh, generational structure, but a lot of how he describes it is very similar to how Dolores describes it.
I know from obviously the raw material is very instructive on that um, type of incarnation, and through my own work, I have been able to identify a multitude, shall I say, just a broader perspective on how pervasive the wonder or participation over humanity's existence has been. And I know in the early 80s, as Ra was providing the initial communication to the LO research folks, that he identified roughly 67 million people were actually wanderers at that time. And I know that that number has significantly decreased down to probably between 5 and 6 million. And that type of contribution on the part of wanderers is diminishing because they powers that be have chosen to initiate actually a fourth density experience in parallel to the third density experience. And so it's a transition in the methodologies of trying to provide a stimulus for the third density population to awaken and evolve. But in your work as a hypnotherapist, people enter into. Would you agree that people enter into some sort of altered state when you put them into that hypnotic state?
Yes, they absolutely enter into an altered state, and some of the evidence of that is that many people that are going into past lives, parallel lives, or future lives, versus when their higher self comes forward, their voice changes, the way they speak changes. Oftentimes, when we bring forward the higher self, or also known as the oversoul, or how Dolores dubbed it, the subconscious, not to be confused with subconscious as we know it in psychology, but basically a part of yourself that has greater wisdom and clarity. That part comes forward. It's very direct, it's very clear, and it's very wise. And we find that across all clients. So, yes, it is an altered state.
But I would assume, I'm going to ask so you can answer. Um, what is the nature of our beingness that you and I are experiencing right now? How would you explain that to someone?
Um, it's like asking somebody who is blind what they look like, is what I
Yeah,
would say.
yeah, yeah. I'm not. I don't. I didn't say it was going to be an easy question.
Just yesterday, I was having a similar conversation with a client of mine during a follow up, and she was just sharing with my partner and I how challenging the last week or two have been, given what's going on in astrology. Plus, she was on that time of the month of a woman's cycle. So she was dealing with some unique challenges spiritually and emotionally. And it just reminded me that, as human beings, being on this earth, I feel that we are operating deaf, dumb, and blind. We think that with our senses we can actually perceive what is going on. In fact, uh, the opposite is true. I feel like, and science proves this too, that we only perceive a very small spectrum of the vibrations around us, whether it's through sight, smell, sound, or touch. But at the deepest level, I don't think we are merely the personality, the body, the profession, or even the story that we've accumulated. Those are aspects of the human experience. My working view is that beneath them is awareness itself. consciousness, experiencing life through a temporary human identity. So the question that fascinates me is whether consciousness is something the brain produces, or whether the brain is more like an instrument through which consciousness expresses itself. I don't claim that hypnosis proves the second possibility, but some of the experiences I've witnessed make me very interested in that question.
Yes. So have you come to any conclusions or can offer any significant direction on what a mind is?
What a mind is.
Hmm.
you, your questions are some of the toughest questions that I've experienced on a podcast, but I really like it because I feel like this is where the value lies for the listeners, is to get past the fluff and get into what someone's perspective may be on a certain subject, in this case the mind. I would say that to me the brain is the physical organ. The mind is the field of thoughts, memories, beliefs, perceptions, emotions, and interpretations through which we experience reality. So consciousness is the awareness in which all of that appears. So an easy way to explain it would be that brain is like the hardware. The mind is the processing patterns and experience. And then you have the consciousness, which is the awareness experiencing it all. So that's would be my humble interpretation. But I can observe, my thoughts, for example. I can observe my emotions, but and I can observe my memories appearing and disappearing. So that raises a fascinating question. If I can observe the activity of my mind, am I the mind itself, or am I the awareness experiencing the mind? Right.
Right.
So, from my experience with meditation, it's taught me that having a thought and being a thought are two very different things. The moment I can witness the thought without automatically identifying with it, there's space. And in that space, I begin to discover that perhaps my mind is something I experience rather than the totality of who I am. So the mind creates the story of who I am. Consciousness may be that which is aware of the story.
How does your experience of deep meditation differ from the experience of yourself or someone who enters into that hypnotic state?
So when I'm in deep meditation, I get imagery, symbolisms, visions, insights, intuitions. We can have different names for it, but I get deeper insight into consciousness, and I'm less related to the body or the person or the name that I've been given, for example. The difference being when you're in that altered state in hypnosis, you're being guided. And it's the intention of both the practitioner and the client that comes into play, in addition to their personal story. And if you're familiar with QHHT, have you ever had a session or have you observed a session before?
I've observed a session and I have attempted a session on numerous times without success.
Okay, all right. Um, well, when you say you've attempted it, were you under training, looking to get your training in? Is that what you were doing, or you were just trying on your own?
Well, no, I was led by a practitioner in each
Oh, I see.
instance.
I see.
But the in retrospect, I'm a longtime meditator, and I know the depths of that um, beingness,
Hmm.
and I communicate openly with my higher self,
Beautiful.
and have in had the opportunity for a number of years to have relative isolation to do that self and consciousness exploration. So I've always been curious what the distinction would be between a hypnotic state and that deep meditative state. The deep meditative state, and you're still processing thoughts in deep meditation. I mean, that's how we experience. We experience creation through thoughts, but the nature of that experience uh, jumps from mind to mind. I had asked you what your perception of a mind is, and my perception of a mind is very simply a bundle of beliefs, which serves as the lens for our experience interpretation. And what we are, I know I'm using, I'm presuming you are using the mind that we have created to enjoy this incarnation. And that mind will essentially dissolve when we leave this incarnation, but the fruit of that learning experience will integrate into our metaphysical self, for lack of a better description. You can call it our soul, but I'm well aware that we exist on all levels of consciousness simultaneously, and our limitation is our capacity to surrender the parameters of any level of consciousness to experience a deeper level of consciousness. But each level of consciousness in and of itself is simply um, a more expansive bundle of beliefs. In other words, fourth density, which we simultaneously participate in, is a different bundle of beliefs that is less restrictive than the third density mind, and fifth density less restrictive than a fourth density, and so forth. Um, so that I don't know. I didn't mean to get off on me. I was just trying to offer um, some perspective on what we have available to us to experience, either through the hypnosis process or through deep meditation. Um, how would you? Yeah, you made the reference of being conscious, and that's a difficult word to use because it's often used as interchangeable with what I would uh, include as part of awareness, and consciousness itself being much more vast. It is the eye of the eye, as is often referred to. It's the EYE of the eye, the center of the eye that has really no bottom to it. It has no end to the depth of it. Uh, so I guess that's leading up to a question: how would you explain consciousness to someone?
I think that I referenced what I see consciousness as, but from the lens of quantum hypnosis, we've come to find that consciousness is not apart from us, but it's a part of us. So we are deeply interwoven with all that is. And I think that also comes through in the teachings of the law of one, where everyone and everything is interconnected. And so for me, consciousness is expressing itself in different ways, just like you and I are talking right now. We may think and perceive that we're two different people, but we may in fact be one consciousness expressing itself differently through two different bodies. And that's the way that I see consciousness based on what I've learned, but I don't claim to know the end all be all of it all. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I'm just talking from my own personal experiences as a quantum hypnotist and from my readings. But when you were talking about meditation earlier, one thing I wanted to highlight is that in meditation, you, as you know, you become the observer of thoughts. sensations, emotions, without necessarily following them. Whereas in quantum hypnosis, you do enter into a deeply relaxed hypnotic state and actively engage with what arises, which might include memories, imagery, emotions, symbolic narratives, experiences interpreted as past lives, or what someone experiences as their higher self. So in meditation, if an image arises, I may simply notice it and let it pass. Whereas in quantum hypnosis, if that same image arises, I might ask, uh, "What is it? Where are you? What are you experiencing? Why is this important for you to see?" So we follow it and we look to find out why they're being shown certain imagery, because we believe that whatever arises is for their best and highest good, and they're supposed to learn something from it. So we look to take the lessons from what arises in quantum hypnosis. So in meditation, can I, a powerful distinction would be, can I stop identifying with the contents of my mind? Whereas in quantum hypnosis, we ask, what can I learn from the material that emerges from beyond my ordinary conscious narrative? So that is how I would say that deep meditation differs from quantum hypnosis. Meditation has taught me a lot. It's taught me not to believe every thought I have. Hypnosis taught
Thank
me,
God.
right? Thank God, yeah. Um, and hypnosis has taught me to become curious about what exists beneath those thoughts, and why um, they come up, or why it may be significant for it to come up during the session. So with meditation, I'm generally not trying to get anywhere in particular. I'm cultivating awareness of what is. But with quantum hypnosis, there's an intention um, that's very particular, and it involves both the practitioner and the client. So the client comes with questions, and we're deliberately exploring deeper layers of their subjective experience. So that's how I would differentiate the two.
Okay, well, let me ask you first of all, in your experiences in meditation, and you described that as becoming the observer of thoughts and being able to dismiss those thoughts that are aberrant or not ones that you want to experience. Um, are you not also using thought to observe the thoughts themselves?
It's a good question. I would say I don't know, because I understand what you're saying, because there have been times where that's usually the point of many of the meditations, is to become the observer, and as you are the observer, you're also having thoughts. um, and although my personal experience understands the distinction you're talking about, I find it difficult to explain the dynamics of it. Beyond that, it's just like, I know exactly what you're talking about, because I experience it in meditation often. Is the thoughts that are coming up, and I understand that, like, I may not understand where they're coming from or why they're coming, and I can observe myself observing them. So that is something that I've experienced in meditation, but I find it to be uh, a more of a lonely journey, in the sense that there's no one, necessarily no person guiding it. um, Whereas in quantum hypnosis, as you know, there's a process that we go through based on thousands of clients and experiences. Dolores has developed this technique that basically brings us the outcome that we're looking for. So I would say that although both are altered states of consciousness, both deep meditation and quantum hypnosis, they are quite different. Um, and I'm sorry if you didn't get to experience quantum hypnosis fully for what it's intended for, but I'll tell you this, that you're not alone in this. There are people that, for whatever reason, are are not easy to access uh, deeper states of consciousness through quantum hypnosis. Dolores has called them left brainers, extreme left brainers.
Okay.
Which is perhaps a better
I've been
term
called
than.
worse, so it's
Eh, well, wait till you hear what she calls the conscious mind. I don't know if you
okay.
heard this, but she calls the
Okay.
conscious mind Mr. Stupid.
Okay. Well, there you go.
She says, whenever Mr. Stupid comes up, you know that the person is not deep enough. So, for many of us experienced practitioners, we have several what we call deepeners, where we look to take the client deeper so that they can be in that theta state of brainwave, where we can access the higher consciousness through them. It's, you know, regardless of our experience, regardless of our abilities, there are times where the client may experience a void, for example, or just see darkness. And in the beginning, that would get me very concerned and worried, because I would think that the session is failing. But what I've come to realize is that uh, whatever comes up is what's meant to come up. And the other thing that I've realized early on, because Dolores told us this, she says there's no bad clients or clients that cannot be hypnotized. It's just a practitioner may not know what they're doing. So that is what Dolores has taught us. And from my experience, having gone through clients that have been exceptionally challenging or left brain, has been that most of them, when given the opportunity and the patience from the practitioner, are able to visualize. And it's almost like it starts very slow, because Mr. Stupid or the conscious mind will look to stay in control, will look to uh, dissect what's going on and question whatever comes up. And that happens a lot in the beginning of the hypnosis with left brainers. But then as we get them deeper into the hypnotic state, we find that they're able to visualize more fluidly, they're able to describe more fluidly without any distractions from the conscious mind. And it's almost like uh, when you start an old car and you're giving it a push, and the
the
engine
mon-
just starts
when the,
catching on.
yeah,
You know,
the momentum's hard to get it going, but once it
that's
gets
what it
going,
is.
then I
hundred
do
percent
um, um, a healing process that is very similar to that, and a lot of people literally can't do it because they're not willing to surrender control. They
Correct.
just and so we have to treat resistance as if it were part of the condition, and once we do that and get rid of the resistance, then they're much more able to go into where they need to go in order to affect the healing. But
Exactly.
let me get back to the question, if I may, and I understand what you're explaining with the hypnosis, but in my obviously my comparative experience is with meditation, and getting back to the um, references you had made to in the hypnotic process, having a guide, having a more specific objective of asking questions. And in my experiences with the meditative state and becoming at that point where you become aware that the observer is the distinctly different from the thoughts that you're attracting on a more swimming level, less deep level. And as that observer can also ask whatever questions that um, you have by intent, and it is through those questions and how the answers come to me in that deep meditative state are not what I would be conventional conscious mind answers. The depth of understanding is much more complete, but it is most definitely telepathic. It's not. Uh, it's sometimes it's visualization. Sometimes I get visualizations. Sometimes it's auditory. It comes in different forms, but it's a greater breadth of understanding because there's feeling with it, but it's not emotional feeling. And that's what brings my question to how that would differ from the hypnotic state, and can we not, as conscious beings, have that same experience without the hypnotic guidance?
So to answer your question first and then expand on it, I would say that yes, you can have that experience without that guidance. And in fact, Dolores has said that as we are advancing and opening up spiritually and with our psychic abilities, there's going to come a time where quantum hypnosis will become redundant because just like you claim that you can access your higher self through meditation, we'll be able to do that at whim. And when that happens, we will no longer need quantum hypnosis. And this is what Dolores has told us. And what we are finding from our own experiences as practitioners is that there is a change that's been happening over the last decade in the experiences of our clients during hypnosis that's indicating that very idea to be true. And what's happening is that in the early days when Dolores first started doing what she's now called QHHT, she found that most people would not have a memory of what they experienced during the QHHT session. And that's why we record it, because some people still don't have a memory of it or have partial memory. But even if they have full memory of it, the information that comes up is very detailed, and there are a number of questions that the client comes with that are usually all answered. So it's very important for the client to re-listen to the recording to be able to understand the lessons that they're meant to awaken to at this time. And so we're finding that more and more people are recalling their experience under hypnosis than they were before. And we're also finding that through QHHT or quantum hypnosis, we can answer a number of questions one after another. Whereas my experience with hypnosis has been that when I go into a hypnosis session, I'm looking for an answer. It's usually 1, 2, or maybe 3 questions that are interrelated that I'm looking to get answered. But when someone comes to me through QHHT, or even when I've had it done on myself, I've had a number of questions. I remember I made the mistake of, for my first 3 sessions where I got hypnotized in the early days, I showed up with 33 questions. And boy, if someone
you
shows
were
up with,
stay there for several days.
perhaps, yes, and it's very challenging, right? As a practitioner, we are taught that we should not keep a person in under hypnosis for more than 2 hours because it can be very tough on the body. There are some people that can easily go a lot longer than that, maybe up to 3 hours. But even still, if you have more than 10 questions, it becomes very challenging for the practitioner to get those questions in, because during the hypnosis portion, there are three main sections, and the first main section is where you're taken into what people describe as past lives or parallel lives or future lives. And so they're experiencing their journeying and seeing these, they're seeing and feeling, and some people, it can be different. Every situation is unique, but for the most part, they will be fully immersed in this movie that they're experiencing. And then after that is done, we bring forward the higher self, or the subconscious, as Dolores calls it, and we look to do a body scan and see if there's any blockages or anything that needs to be discussed or healed. And then from there, we go on to the questions, which is the third part. And so we have to be very mindful of the time because we want to, and the person, the client, and their body, how much they can handle. Most of the clients that come see me are on the are north of 40, and I've had clients in their 70s and 80s come see me as well. And by the time that they come see me, many of them are suffering from all sorts of symptoms and challenges, and they also have an incredible life story that they're looking to share, which is a very important part of QHHT. As you may know, that there's a pre-hypnosis portion where what we call the interview in QHHT, where we sit down with the client and go over their life from the time that they were born, their earliest childhood memories, their experiences at home, in school, their relationships, any symptoms that they're experiencing. We go into details with all of that, and that can easily be an hour, 2 hours, sometimes more. But that sets the foundation for a great hypnosis session because they are focused on their life. They are focused on what matters to them now, given the reflection of their life. And they often end up sharing things that many of their loved ones aren't even aware of. We've had clients, I've heard all kinds of stories, from rape to, being abducted by aliens, and everything in between. So, every human experience is unique. Every person's story is unique. And so the session itself is also unique. It will always be what is meant for their highest good. And my experience with some of the people that I've worked with, and I do specialize in left brainers because I I found a lot of practitioners when they can they don't have success, but the client still wants to experience something, they'll send them to me. And in the beginning, it would be a challenge. It was intimidating, but it was a challenge for me because I knew that I needed to get my reps in, but I also wanted to get the results. I had one gentleman that comes to mind who has a very successful chiropractic business here in Toronto. He was studying to become a QHHT practitioner, and he had been hypnotized twice prior to coming to me, and he was not able to access his subconscious, and it was very frustrating for him. And the last time, it was actually a very experienced hypnotist who tried to put him under and could not. And she, so he was beginning to lose hope. And he only told me this once I once I showed up and we started talking in the pre-interview. And needless to say, I became very nervous. And so just prior to the hypnosis session, I went to the bathroom and I said some prayers, and and I was really hoping that things would work out. And I was really grateful because during the hypnosis session, it, like we mentioned earlier, it started off slow, but as the momentum started going, he started to visualize very vividly, um, and be able to describe what he was seeing and experiencing. And ultimately, we were able to access his subconscious. And I would say that it was a great success. But it's not always the case. I've had clients that have just seen darkness, and what I've come to find is that even in the darkness, there's messages, and sometimes they're meant to be with that, and sometimes it's that they're not ready yet for something that might open up. And so I try not to interpret what the reasons may be. I try to do my best to give them an experience and to get their questions answered. Um, Although I would say 99% of the people that do come see us, it turns out to be an incredible experience. But there are some that it can be, they'll have certain expectations, but they will not get what they are expecting. And so we try to prepare people for that and try to avoid that as well. One of the things that I've done that I found very helpful is I've prepared a video for people prior to coming to a session that they should watch, of tips and tricks that I wish I knew as a client before I had my sessions, because it would have helped me have even more profound experiences. And so that's something that I really encourage people to watch prior to their sessions. So I don't know how long it's been for you, Dean, that you've done the session, but if you ever want to give it another shot, um, I'd be happy to see if we can give it another go, and who knows, maybe it will be different this time.
I'm always anxious to explore. It's
Wonderful.
I greatly enjoy the experiences that I've had and having new experiences. But let me go back and uh, dig a little bit deeper on something that you were explaining in what you described as phase one of the hypnotic process, when people are recalling past lives and having getting into that deeper realm. What is it they're experiencing? Where is this um, resource that they go into in order to have those thoughts come to them?
That's a really great question, and I don't believe I have the answer to that. I don't know where it is that they go. All I know is that what I've been taught by Dolores works, and it works 99% of the time. And every time they'll go into different experiences, and they may describe it as past lives, or they may see it as a future, a possible future, or a parallel future. And the truth is, we don't know if that is actually the case. But what we do know is whatever they're shown holds lessons for them. And those lessons during the hypnosis portion, where the subconscious comes forward, those lessons are made manifest. And from those lessons, a lot of times they do experience healing. Why? Because they'll find out the root causes of certain symptoms that they have, or what they may be experiencing. And when you go to the root of something and you face it, you find that a lot of the illnesses that people suffer from, or diseases that they have, are rooted in emotions. In fact, I don't know if you heard this, but Dolores Cannon has a daughter who's taken on the official work of Dolores. Her name is Julia Cannon, and Julia has written a beautiful book called Soul Speaks, and it was a book that she was prodded to write for a long time, and she reluctantly came about and wrote it, and has helped so many people. And essentially, in the book, it talks about how every disease is linked to an underlying emotion that has been carried for a prolonged period of time. So, for example, cancer. We found that through Dolores' sessions, and those sessions of other practitioners, that usually we find that cancer is rooted in suppressed anger. And depending on where the cancer is, we could tell you what
The nature of
the nature of that. Yeah. And then thyroid would be, because it's in the throat chakra, it has to do with self-expression, something that one has been wanting to speak their truth, but they haven't.
That's usually a secondary blockage before, because my teachings are that when we have this bundle of beliefs that is our mind, when we either do something that we think we're not supposed to do, or we don't do something that we think we are supposed to do, either way. And that's what guilt is. We violated the authenticity of our identity. And so consequently, we feel guilt, and that's something that we experience usually in our gut or our solar plexus. But we have to emphasize that others that we have agency with, that we're relying upon to give us the stability of our identity, we can't have them find out about that, because we fear not getting the love that we need, that we perceive that we're getting from those individuals. So we create a secondary blockage in our throat chakra, as you're pointing out, because we fear that disclosure. And part of my teachings for healing is the 12-step program. And that's what's so strategic about deeply doing the 12 steps, is breaking down that fear of disclosure. And initiating, our energy always flows upward. And so you have to get rid of that in order to clear those lower blockages, or those other consternating experiences in order to allow that healing to take place. But yeah, the work that I do with the methodologies that I do, the experience is exactly the same when we begin to experience significant clearing. Their memory of early life experiences, and it always goes back, if not to early life experiences, to past life experiences. And it's a common experience for people just using the healing methodologies that I use to recall their birth. And many, a few go beyond recalling their birth. I had one woman that recalled her birth, and the doctor apparently dropped her when she was being born. And her father was a OBGYN, which is ironic. And she left her body for that moment when she fell, and then came back into her body several hours later. She recalled that, asked her mother about it, and her mother, of course, was traumatized at, what? You realize that? You remember? How'd you know that? And so that caused a little family consternation there. The dad was an attending OBGYN, not the actual doctor in charge, but he was an attending. And her mom had that, but she was horrified that her daughter knew that they dropped her. But that she would have never remembered that. It had we'd done the healing to allow her to go back and recall that.
Wonderful. Yeah. I can relate to that. We get a lot of clients that have memories that come up from early childhood, and their time of birth that causes waves, to say the least.
A new topic for Thanksgiving conversation this year. Yeah, fun. So, Ali, I've greatly appreciated this. I think this will be very helpful for our audience, and I'm delighted to have you as a resource for me to refer people to, because in the work that I do, I encounter a lot of people that are keen on going more deeply into their beingness and exploring their beingness. And I think, meditation is great, but it takes a while to develop a meditative practice. And I explain to my students that almost everybody comes to meditation running away from the stick, whatever that stick is. And the stick hurts. And so they're looking for relief from that stick until one day they get a bite of the apple. And that may take 2 years, 4 years, whatever they're willing to, whenever they're willing to surrender those essentially defenses to discovering their real self. And I've often thought that being able to combine a good hypnotic practice with their curiosity could expedite that process significantly. Would you concur?
I concur 100%. In fact, I used to think that, if someone has a meditative practice, they would be better clients in quantum hypnosis. But I found that most of the people that come see me don't have a meditative practice. And despite of that, they can have some really profound experiences, which will consequently open them up to a meditative practice, because many times their higher self will recommend it to them that they need to meditate. And that's something that's really powerful in quantum hypnosis, is that we as a practitioner aren't giving the advice, or we're not the ones, unlike a psychic reading, we're not the ones telling them how things should be or will be. It's coming from their own mouth through their higher self, that wisdom of they should meditate. Well, how often should they meditate? And, we dig into it. How should they meditate? And for each person, it may be different and may be unique. So we refrain from giving our own judgment, even though I have used clairvoyancy in my sessions. I try not to give my perspective of things until after the hypnosis, just because I don't want it to interfere with the process that I've been taught by my teacher.
Right.
And I found it to be super effective. And I also get to test out what comes up for me and what the visions that I see, and to confirm it. For example, many things come up that get confirmed during the session. I had a young lady, come see me recently, who for most of her life has felt this uh, almost like angry energy within her that she's been suppressing and almost ashamed of, and it the energy is so powerful that she's experienced choking. And she's not the only one. I've had another person had that experience, but it was for a different reason. But this young lady, when she was telling me all this during her pre-interview, I kept getting a visual of fire and water. I didn't know why, but I wrote it down and I didn't mention it to her because I was curious to see what comes up during the session. And sure enough, one of the lifetimes that she's taken to, she's a mermaid in the ocean. And she has that affinity with water, and then she has this we take her into a future of that life, and what is happening is she's on trial, and she is surrounded by these people in a coliseum sort of edifice underwater, and her father's there and all these people are there in the audience, and there she can feel the judgment of the people coming towards her as if it's energy, and it's accumulating within her beingness, and she can feel this light developing in her body, and she was feeling all of this viscerally during the hypnosis, and she described it in detail, and then we talked about it afterwards as well. And what ultimately ended up happening was she felt that that energy could no longer be contained and that it could potentially destroy everyone. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. As we move forward, she ended up destroying everybody, including her own father. And then she proceeded to live the rest of her life, 30 plus years, in solitude. And when the higher self came forward in the uh, later portion of the hypnosis, we came to find out that she's always carried this energy, this power within her for lifetimes. But in this current lifetime, she's suppressed it because out of fear, unconsciously, the fear that it can destroy her life and others. And now the higher self gave her some tools that will help her to move that energy and to use that energy in an effective way. One of the things that she was encouraged to do, which is very in line with her personality, was to play sports such as paddle tennis, and dancing, things that will get her body moving, that will help the energy move through her, and also to embrace that power that she wields, uh, and that also to realize that it's not just her imagination thinking that she has something. She happens to be Brazilian. She has that Latin blood. So, on the surface, one might think, oh, it's because she's a Latina, but there was something much deeper than that. And the several lifetimes that she was shown confirmed that there were certain things that she needed to understand about who she is and who she is chosen to be in this lifetime that can be lived in a more balanced way with the powers that she has. So that was something that I was reminded to share right now because of what you were telling me about.
Good. Super. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And yes, I welcome anyone that you send to me. The beauty of the work that I do is I am able to do it remotely.
Hmm.
You may or may not know this, but Dolores had forbade us from doing this work online during the time that she was alive.
Really?
Um, yes, she said, what if the internet cuts off and the person is being burned at the stake, and you need to have certain precautions. And she had good reason for it too back then, because the internet wasn't as reliable, and we didn't have safe techniques to do it. However, after she passed on and we had to deal with COVID, many of us had to still continue our practice, and we did online. And we found that it ended up helping a lot more people, and we were able to put into place safety measures that ensure a very safe and effective hypnosis session, just as if they were in person. But we were able to do it online. As you can imagine, a lot of people can't physically come to us.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are hospital, bed bound. Some people have phobias of getting out. Others are living in remote parts of the world, or they may be far away from the practitioner they want to work with. But now we are able to do that. We don't call it QHHT. We call it, quantum hypnosis or beyond quantum hypnosis. But in essence, it's very similar.
Well, actually, too, your business would be seasonal because it gets really cold where you are.
It does, although that doesn't stop people from getting out. As Canadians, I think we're used to being out regardless of what the weather is.
And
Yeah.
I used to have, in my former life, I used to have some Canadian clients that would come to Tennessee to Memphis, and it would be 20 degrees in winter, and they're walking around in shirt sleeves just fine, and I've got 3 heavy coats on, just trying to stay with them. So it's all what we're used to.
Correct. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's all relative, right? It's what we're used to.
Yeah.
But I've been to Memphis, Tennessee. I've lived in the United States for 15 years.
Okay.
Lived in Kentucky, lived in New York, traveled all over, and there's each state is unique. Each state has its beauty, and sometimes I do miss that heat because in Canada it is on the colder side.
Yes, it does. Well, when you get accustomed to the heat and when you feel comfortable when it's 95 degrees out and everybody else is just dying of perspiration, you know that where you're supposed to live, I guess.
Well, good for you if you feel accustomed to that. And I just want to say that it was such a pleasure being on your podcast, and I loved your questions. They were tough questions, but they were really good, very thought provoking.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And my objective is to provide our listeners with some resources that they don't to get everywhere. And I'm grateful for your contributions to those answers. And I look forward to chatting with you more in the future,
Would
and
love that.
see if we can't do some reciprocal business, and maybe advance some significant healing for the folks that we both work.
That would be great.
They were great. Any words of wisdom that you would like to share before we depart?
Well, for the listeners, I would say that there's a quick little story of a student coming to his teacher and asking, how do I know that I'm on the right path? How do I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And the teacher responded that you're on the right place at the right time because that's where you are.
You are where you're supposed to be. Everywhere you go, there you are.
100%. And this is the thing, right? A lot of us think that, okay, when I get that job, when I get that girl or that guy or that house or that car or that money, then I'll be happy, or then I'll, be satisfied.
Yeah.
But the key that we learn, and we learn this, specifically through meditation, is to accept what is and to look to transcend it in a natural way rather than trying to force an outcome or trying to be someone that we're not, And I'm reminded that, just like a snowflake or a leaf on a tree, there's no one that's exactly the same. So if you're going to be someone, be yourself.
That's
And
right, because all the other ones are taken.
correct.
Yeah. Ali, thank you very much. I'm going to click us off record, and if you'll hold on just a moment.
Absolutely.